That human at the far end of the bar had been watching her. She was only slightly perturbed by it. After all, she was 2.8 meters tall. He was 1.8. At first glance, she would have guessed he had a third as much muscle mass as she did. She was slender for what she weighed, thanks to the muscle density of her species. Even if he wanted to cause trouble, he'd have his hairy ass kicked out of the airlock faster than he could vomit whatever was in his stomach after being punched in the gut. She looked around nonchalantly, just to see if he was still staring. He was. Worse yet, her little maneuver did not go unnoticed, and he smiled wide when she met his eyes for less than a second. He got up and made his way over, much to her annoyance. She clapped her mandibles flush to her jawline, and the spinal plates along her neck smoothed out. The colour in her neck even dulled to a sickly grey. If she didn't come across as get lost, she honestly didn't know what did. "Hey," said the human, sliding up into the vacant stool next to her, watching her take a long sip of her drink. "Call me Jay. You and me? I think we should do it." She spat her drink a full meter, spewing the blue liquid over the rusted wall behind the bar. She wiped her mouth and vibrated her mandibles to rid them of anything her arm had missed. The human smiled wider, clearly impressed. "Damn," he said with a laugh. "Listen, you little vermin," she said as she motioned for another drink. "First, I'll admit you've got something in you for that remark. Stupidity, bravery, I don't know. Second," she panicked, fumbling for words, "I don't even know what you mean." She shook her head, as if he'd believe that. He gave her a mischievous look, then swung his head around to stare at her first drink still clinging stubbornly to the wall. "You know what I meant." "Nope," she said, clearly lying. Not that it mattered. Whether or not she knew what it meant, she just didn't want to deal with him. A tiny, stupid little creature? Please. Perhaps a koivak or a nair. They were hot stuff that made her mandibles all aflutter. Broad in the torso, multiple limbs, strong and clever. "Come on," he said, undeterred. "You, me, penis, vagina." "I don't have a vagina." The human stopped mid-sentence, as if someone had just slapped him. "What?" "Don't have one." "You sure?" She scoffed. "I think I know my own body." "Maybe you have one and you just don't know it." Oh, excuse me, please," she said, raising her voice. "Educate me on the anatomy of my own species, I beg of you. Wait, let me find you a diagram in the waste rooms and you can point out exactly the things I don't know." He frowned slightly and fished out a little black book from his vest pocket and began to flip through it, pausing every so often to stare at one of its pages. He would stop at a page, point at something, nod thoughtfully, and then move on. Curious, and knowing he could do nothing to stop her, she reached out and snatched the book from his hands. "Hey, first you want to have sex, then you want to read a book? Must be a good read," she said, flipping through a few pages before settling on one to read. It was a written account of... "You're a damn deviant," she playfully said, still reading. The page contained a recounting of a sexual encounter with a female ovrika, a heavy on clinical terms and with a special focus on the physiology of the species. "I prefer biology, Professor. Tenure at Galcora Station, you know." She kept reading, actually curious now, instead of that fleeting curiosity she had felt earlier that was just partly just her wanting to annoy him. Each page was a different sentient species, mostly female. All of them had vaginas or something that closely resembled one, but with a few males scattered here and there. Every single entry had handwriting that didn't match the rest of it, and the non-matching writing was different for every page. She surmised it was his partner at the time's writing. They actually graded him, and most every single one was a glowing review. A Bolkis, Kovarigan, Ilulu, even a damn Vildak. How in the name of every star in the universe did this human, with only 2 arms, 2 legs, 1 mouth and 1 tongue, and 1 sex organ manage to satisfy a Vildak? She had heard stories of foreplay alone taking 2 standard weeks and muscle contractions powerful enough to bust down a bulkhead. It was apparently true, if this human's account wasn't an outright lie. "What's this here?" she asked, pointing to a little number at the bottom of the page. A different number appeared at the bottom of every page. Her first guess was an ICup number, but they were different for nearly every sector of the galaxy, so she couldn't be sure. "The partner's personal ICup address," he said. She looked next to each number and found another set, easily recognizing them as dates, some of them as recent as within the last week. She thought for a moment, long and hard. The color in her neck began to return. She held out one of her hands expectantly. "Yes?" "Give me something to write with." He obliged and she quickly scribbled something onto an empty page, then handed the book back to him. "Visha, female Ivni, 2.8 meters tall, weight 101.2 kilos, he said, reading aloud with a stupid grin. "You?" "Yes," Visha said, grabbing him by the hand and leading him towards the elevator. Her neck practically glowed green, the plates on the back of her neck fully extended, and a hungry fire glowed in her eyes. "It's not a vagina. You'll be getting a crash course, so try to keep up." That night cycle, tangled in the sheets, her skin glistering with human sweat and Ilfni secretions, she gently nudged him to see if he was still asleep. He was. She quickly broke out a little red book, and, finding an empty page, began to write. J, male human, 1.8 meters tall, weight approximately 72 kilos. 72 kilos? Huh. Even manlets can get laid in space.